This is the Unnamed Sports Show here on the Sports Talkline Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. I am, of course, your host, Joshua, this Thursday, December 10th. So today on the show, I will be joined by Sportsnet 650, Satiar Shah, and we're going to be talking about the NHL and the Canucks. So Sat is the host of the program with Andrew Walker from 4 to 7 p.m. on Sportsnet, and he's also the Canucks in-game host. So with the NHL getting its official start date, we have lots to chat about. But before we get into things, make sure to like, subscribe down at the bottom, hit that big blue join button, get lots of extra perks, all that stuff, and make sure to chat and interact with the show and tell me what you like about me and Sat's conversations and all that thing. So the NHL is back, so let's get right into things with my guest, Sat Shah. So the NHL season is starting back up on January 13th, which means the Vancouver Canucks are back. And I'm thrilled to be joined today on the Unnamed Sports Show by Satiar Shah of Sportsnet 650. Sat, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me on.
First and most importantly, want to make sure you and your family are doing safe and healthy during these times.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. Same for you and everybody else listening too. I hope everybody is safe and doing their best to pass the time, especially over the holidays. I know it's not easy, but totally, I wish the best for everybody, and especially you as well and your family.
Yeah, we're all doing safe and staying healthy, keeping our bubbles really small, so that's good.
Yeah.
It feels like it was like ages ago since the Tampa Bay Lightning lifted the Stanley Cup, but we're finally going to have NHL hockey back. I want to get into so many things with you today. So I want to get your thoughts on the NHL's plan for the 2021 season.
Well, we're still trying to get it finalized here for hockey to get back going in January. So everything that I've gathered so far, and you've heard the insiders talk about this, they're aiming for January 13th start date, but I would still be kind of surprised if they get hockey going by January 13th. There's still some things they have to resolve, and then you have to get everybody back in the market. You got to go through the quarantine, and you have to hope that nobody has to shut down their facilities for an extended period of time when guys come back, and perhaps you might have some positive tests. So as optimistic as I am that hockey will get played and hockey will be back, you're going to watch your Canucks play this upcoming season in the new year. I'm not sure on the date yet, but the main takeaway is we are going to get hockey back in some form or another by mid-January, at the latest early February. So super excited about that. We're probably going to see anywhere from 55, maybe even up to 65 games. We'll see how the owners and players figure this stuff out. But we are going to see an extended season that's going to be in that range, and we might see an expanded playoff as well, because it's going to create more money for the league if you have an expanded playoff. So those are the things that I'm expecting to see here over the next couple of weeks.
So for an expanded playoff, are we talking about like something similar to what we had this year?
Yeah, I think potentially it could be in that range. So you're looking at anywhere from, usually 16 teams make it, 8 teams in each conference, right? You can see anywhere from 18 to 24 teams getting in. I'm not sure if they'll do 24 like they did in the return to play, because they curtailed the season with everything else going on. They didn't want a team coming back and, only playing, one game or 2 games in the regular season. They wanted to see if they could actually, get into and play a series that would be meaningful. So I'm expecting anywhere from 18 to 24 teams being the playoff field.
Could you see something like what the NBA did with like a play-in series?
Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, I think all these things are on the table, but one thing is becoming very clear. The league makes a lot of money in the playoffs, especially on the TV stuff. If you're going to have a shorter season and you are paying the players their full salaries, minus escrow, minus the deferrals, so far, and this is what Friedman talked about, it hasn't been 100%, I can't say for certain this is the case, but it seems like the players are getting their full salaries based on an 82-game season, no matter how many games they play. Now, minus escrow, minus the deferral, which they'll get back later on the deferrals. But so that tells you that there is going to be a lot of money going to the players from the owners' pockets this season. And how do they make that money back if you can't play 82 games and have your TV money come through? Then I would imagine to make up that money, then you would expand the playoff roster, because that's what happens in the playoffs. You generate more revenue. So that's kind of the driving force behind this. But what could happen, especially when you have 32 teams in a league next season, after next season when Seattle comes in, you probably want to expand the playoffs anyways and not only have 16 teams out of 32 make it. I know people talk about watering down the playoff format potentially, but listen, go back in NHL history. You had 16 teams make it when the league had less than 27 teams, right? So, I mean, I don't think it's a historical issue here at all. I mean, you had the original 6 teams, and most of the teams made the playoffs in the past. So as far as the discrepancy with teams making the playoffs versus teams in the league, I think 16 out of 32 is kind of on the low end. So I would like to see the playoff format expand to some level. To what you mentioned, I love to see the play-in series. Do you add 1 or 2 extra teams in each conference that has to play so you have the 9-8 seed playing, or you have the 10 seed come in and you have the 10 seed play the 7 seed, you have the 8 seed play the 9 seed, and that determines 2 teams, maybe do a best of 5. I think all those things are on the table here as the NHL and the PA continue discussing how to return to play this season.
Well, it would make sense as why we didn't get as much pushback from the owners for the collective bargaining agreement as we, originally had with the things, because they have to get to 50-50 somehow, and they're just going to figure it out down the line, I guess, which is good. And then using the added playoff format is a great way to get there and add to those revenues.
Oh, absolutely.
So looks like we're going to see an all Canadian division, at least to start the year. That's pretty cool. I'm excited about this. Anything specific that you're looking forward to for Canadian division? Like, would there be games that you're going to be like, okay, I'm marking my calendar, these are ones that I got to watch?
Well, obviously, anytime they play the Leafs, it's going to be exciting. The Calgary Flames this year, we know the Edmonton Oilers, for instance, and the Canucks have had a lot of trouble against the Winnipeg Jets, right? I mean, that's a team they've had a really hard time beating, and they're going to have to find a way to beat the Jets at least 2 or 3 or 4 times. If you're playing these teams 10 times potentially each, that's a lot of games, right? And you can't get blanked by the Winnipeg Jets the way the Canucks have over the past few years in the regular season. So they're going to have to find a way to overcome the big boogeyman, which is the Jets, at least in the matchup game. So I'm super intrigued to see how they match up against the Jets. We all know about the Edmonton thing and the Calgary thing, and of course, Toronto. With Montreal, it gets interesting because of Tyler Toffoli all of a sudden, right? Like, he's on that team. So there is that, bit of a connection coming in. The Ottawa Senators, I don't think there's going to be a heated rivalry necessarily. But here's the thing with the Ottawa Senators. They're a young team. They're an exciting team. They got nothing to lose. They're probably going to be a bit better than most expect them to be. They have an undefined upside because they have so many young players. We'll see if Matt Murray can become the guy we knew he was a few years ago. So all of these things kind of have to fall into place here. But the thing I'm most intrigued by is the fact that the Canucks are playing other Canadian rivals up to 10 times. And that's going to create lots of animosity. The fan base is going to get after each other. Anything that happens heated between those two teams is going to live on game on. So, I mean, we're essentially going to be seeing mini playoff series throughout the regular season. And I think that adds a lot of spice to this regular season. The only thing you hope doesn't happen is that everybody gets tired of each other and kind of loses interest in playing each other that many times. But because of novelty, because of how competitive the division is going to be this year, I think the fact that you're going up against Canadian rivals 10 times is going to create a lot of bad blood, and that makes for more exciting and genuine hockey between the teams.
And I mean, I'm excited. My dad's a huge Leafs fan, and I actually just got a notification today that 1 year ago today was the Leafs Canucks game. So we always would go to that. So we're going to have a lot more rivalries to look forward to this year.
I can't believe it's been a year, man. I rember that's the game they played in Vancouver.
Yes, right? That's the one in Vancouver. Yeah.
That's been a year now. I can't believe it. That was a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe it's December now already too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Canucks had an interesting offseason with so many players literally going to Calgary. What was one of the kind of signings that made you cringe when Calgary signed one of the former Canuck players?
Well, I mean,
even just any of the signings. It could be Toffoli or Thatcher.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, with Calgary, it's the Jacob Markstrom thing, obviously. Now, I actually have no issue with the Canucks not giving Markstrom 6x6. Yeah. I mean, I had maintained all year long that I walk away from $6 million to Jacob Markstrom. I don't pay Jacob Markstrom $6 million. I don't give him 6 years on a contract. If we're talking 5 years, we're talking 4 years, $5 million. Okay, that's like the highest end I would go. I would have preferred somewhere in the 4-year deal. So I have no issue with the Canucks not signing Markstrom. That's just way too much money for what I feel comfortable paying a guy. But he's in the same division now, and we know he's a high-end goalie. I do have question marks about how he's going to fit in with that team, because with goalies, as much as he's incredible, does his style really fit how the Flames play? And can he be the same level of guy without Ian Clark and also a team that plays differently than the Canucks? And I think that's something that remains to be seen. But the one that obviously made me cringe the most was Tyler Toffoli.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you're talking about a contract that I think if anybody would have told you the Canucks can get Tyler Toffoli to 4.3 over 4 years, we'd be delighted. We'd jumping up and down,
right away.
right? I mean, we celebrated right away. And the fact that the Canucks were not able to clear the space to make that deal, and also they didn't have the willingness from, whether it's management, ownership, or however it falls in, to spend that type of money into Toffoli without clearing some money, it was an opportunity lost without question. And if you got Toffoli signed, let's say it was a hair or more to stay in Vancouver, 4.4, 4.5, that is just such an incredible deal for a player of his caliber. The age he's at, the amount of points that he scores, and that contract, as long as he's productive, is going to age really well. You could have been uncomfortable giving Toffoli, say, 5 times 5 or 5.5 times 5, or, a bigger contract for a guy who is really good, but is that really what you want to pay a guy? To me, just such an opportunity lost, not getting a player like Toffoli who had clear chemistry with Pettersson and with Miller and on this team and fit in so well in so many different ways that it was a huge loss not being able to get him signed on a contract that seems very fair. And if I had my way, I mean, would you rather have Virtanen here? Would you rather have, Toffoli here? And it comes down to this, right? Like if the Canucks really, really wanted to move Virtanen to clear $2 million, and if they wanted to find a way to say buy out Sven Baertschi, they could have signed Toffoli. So it goes beyond just management. I do think, I'm not sure if ownership gave them the green light to sign this contract unless they could clear money. Because if you look at Virtanen, it's a 2-year deal, a lot less money. There's more flexibility to get out from it. If you buy out Sven Baertschi, there's more money being spent. So I do think there were some restrictions that prevented the Canucks to get the clearance, at least management, to get the clearance to go and sign Toffoli. So that's the thing that's really upsetting. And from what I had heard before a decision was made, that Toffoli was really wanting to sign in Vancouver, and that I had heard there was a lot of optimism on both sides that a deal would get done. I don't know what happened that prevented the deal from getting done. I have my theory, like I mentioned. I think that management went to ownership and said, hey, we have this plan. We want to keep Toffoli. This is the money that we're looking at. And they were told, yeah, you want to do that? Clear some money first. Get rid of a contract off the books for a couple of years. You want to do that? Go ahead and do it. And the priority was get a defenseman. And they went out and got Nate Schmidt, a big contract, of course. But that was essentially the capital they had left to spend. They spent it on Nate Schmidt. And I don't think they got the green light to go and spend more money long-term or give another big contract to a player, a relatively big contract. So I think that's what prevented the Canucks from getting Toffoli done. And it's unfortunate because I do think both sides had a good feeling about this. And that's something I had heard. I had heard that basically you could get Toffoli signed for a hair under $5 million, pretty close to what he was getting paid. And I thought, if that's what it looks like, and you saw what the contract was ultimately, so we were correct in the way we had heard what the money could be that he would be willing to sign for, I thought that would just get a deal done. And there was a lot of confidence on Toffoli's side that the Canucks would just make the offer and they get a deal done. But that call never happened. So it is super unfortunate, and that's one that stings the most because you're talking about a big impact player on a good ticket that you couldn't find a way to keep.
And Tyler Toffoli really kind of solidified the top six because he allowed Boeser to move it on to the second line with play with Horvat and Pearson, or Green to juggle the lines a little bit. And then also too, you're losing Tyler Madden, even if it is a smaller prospect and the pick there.
Yeah.
So that is disappointing that management wasn't able to do that, but obviously they had to pick and choose. So joined by Satiar Shah of Sportsnet 650 here on the Unnamed Sports Show. Let's flip the question. What was the move that you liked best by Jim Benning and the Canucks this offseason?
I think it's the most obvious one, getting Nate Schmidt.
Yeah.
I mean, Nate Schmidt's an incredible player, Josh. I mean, it's funny. The Canucks don't have depth on the blue line, but their top four is without question improved. And God love Chris Tanev. Warrior, works his butt off, right? I mean,
block shots,
block shots, great leader. The guys love him. I had no interest in giving Chris Tanev a contract beyond 1 year, right? So it's like
he earned it, but we're not giving it to him.
No, right? And God love him. I mean, I'm so happy someone gave him that contract. I mean, this is a Warrior, right? So when it comes to Chris Tanev, I'm super happy for him. I don't know how that contract's going to age for the Calgary Flames. Like, Canucks should have not signed Chris Tanev to anything beyond a 1 year deal, maybe 2 years at a cheap, but there's no way he was going to do that, right? So he didn't do it. The Canucks may have been willing to go to 3, around $4 million per season, but obviously the money was just more in Calgary, so he ends up just signing with the Calgary Flames instead. But getting Nate Schmidt, is still a bit underrated, I think, because we spend so much time now thinking about, okay, the Canucks lost Toffoli. I mean, the Canucks didn't get Thatcher back. You know, the Canucks downgraded in goal, going with Holtby and not bringing Markstrom back, and the team is so much worse. And on paper, yeah, it's hard to argue the team is better. But their top four might be significantly better, actually, because Nate Schmidt is just that good and how he would fit in with this team. And one of the things the Canucks lacked so much outside of Quinn Hughes and to a lesser degree, Tyler Myers, was having guys that could lug the puck out, having guys that can make plays with the puck. Tanev was good defensively, good first pass, but he wasn't really making plays, right? Now, playing with Quinn at times, he got into good positions and he did show a bit more offensive upside at times, but he wasn't a guy that was going to skate his way out of trouble or create a play out of nothing. And that's what you really need come postseason. You see how much time and space goes away. And you saw how much people put pressure on Quinn Hughes at all times. So what happens? Well, they start moving the puck over to guys like Thatcher, move the puck over to guys like Jordy Ben. And those guys are good players. They work hard, they battle hard, but they're not making plays. They're not creating something out of nothing. So all of a sudden, you saw what happened in the playoffs. When Thatcher got overloaded, when he got overpressured, he wasn't really making good plays. And when the Canucks don't have enough puck movers and the one puck moving guy on your team and the two puck moving guys on your team get pressured or they get their time and space taken away, well, the other guys don't know how to make a play with the puck on the back end. So they'll just keep going on those guys. Now, if you have, say, Schmidt and Hughes together, or you have Myers in a different pair and you have three guys that move the puck that well, then you're almost begging for trouble if you overload one guy, because the other guy's going to get the puck and he's going to make a play. He's going to find a way to alleviate pressure and get out and make a play when guys are converging down on you on your own end. And that little difference in the back end, especially in the top four, as long as they stay healthy, could make the defense significantly better than it was last year. Because now you have three puck movers that can find a way to alleviate pressure and create something offensively. So I look at the back end as being a lot better. The biggest question mark is the third pair, right? Yeah. But I look at Nate Schmidt. Had the Canucks maybe brought Thatcher back and had the Canucks say, done something different and had Toffoli back, we'd be sitting and talking about the Canucks being really dangerous, right? And not having Toffoli, not having Thatcher makes a big difference. But out of those three players, the most impactful player would have been Nate Schmidt. And I think we can't forget how big of an impact he can make. And the Canucks still need help on their third pair. But there is a world where maybe one of Ulevi, one of Chatfield is actually legitimate. And all of a sudden you have five defensemen that can play. And then all of a sudden things might fall into place a lot better. But the Nate Schmidt one, without question, is the best addition the Canucks made.
Well, I mean, when you were talking, I wrote down new age defenseman.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. What it comes down to, it comes down to puck moving defensemen. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not about necessarily the block shot, big, throw you into the boards, push you out in front of the net kind of defenseman that we used to see 5-10 years ago. Yeah. It's kind of the guy who's got the good skate, the good edge work that can turn out of pressure and, move the puck up ice and start the rush.
Oh, absolutely. And having more of those guys, the better it is. I mean, yeah, Chris Tanev knows how to defend in his own end, but you want to be spending less time in your own end. Now, come playoff time, you need those guys that know how to defend their own end. You got to find ways to defend. But the Canucks did a good job defending in their own end, but they still were outmatched against the Vegas Golden Knights because they couldn't create pressure. And if it wasn't for Thatcher Demko standing on his head, you weren't going to have a chance to even be in that series to 7 games, right? So that's what you really need. You're right, Josh. You need those new age puck-moving defensemen that not only know how to alleviate pressure, but create some offense as well. And when you have Quinn Hughes being the one guy that was creating offense all year, and Myers to some extent, but he was playing a different role, right? He was playing more of a defensive role at times, and on with Fantenberg at times. You can't just have one player that's essentially the engine of your back end. You need a couple of guys that can do that.
No, and you can't call on Hughes for 26 minutes a night this season. So, we kind of mentioned prospects a little bit there. One that I talked to last week was Yanni Yarmov, and he seems to understand that new age defenseman style. It's something he's wanting to work on. Another prospect that I wanted to touch on, because what an amazing goal that he had this morning. Nils Höglander. Wow.
He's when it comes to skill level and the audacity he plays with, it's incredible, right? You talk about a guy who's unafraid, he's bold, he takes chances, and once he gets open space, he's going to dangle you, he's going to do stuff. He's completely unafraid. Now, those things are great, the dangles, the skill, and all that stuff. It's going to be a lot harder for him to find that space and time to pull off that stuff. And in the NHL, you may not have the opportunity to do those things as often. So you got to find other ways to create offense. But the thing that impresses me so much, Josh, is the way he retrieves the puck, the way he battles along the board, the way he's able to create that space. To me, that's the real transferable skill. All these guys, when they have open space, can do something. They can dangle, right? Mm-hmm. Some guys better than others, but you're not getting that in the NHL very often. Look at how Pettersson was played, right? In his rookie season, he had more time and space, but as time went on, they took that away from him. So you had to find different ways to create time and space. You had to find different ways to retrieve the puck and make plays. That's the thing that I see in Hoglander's game that excites me the most. And I know that sounds nerdy because we're looking at the other things he does, and it's so incredible, the skill, and that's really what captures our imagination. But it's how he's able to put himself in spots to create that space. And if he's able to translate that puck retrieval, the board battle, how strong he is on his skates, and that will he has when he plays, and especially when you're undersized, Josh, you got to be a fire hydrant. You got to be a buzzsaw. You cannot be afraid. You have to be the toughest guy in the corner, because if you're not coming away with the puck, because guys lean on you, right? And Hoglander has that in his game. He's not quite Victor Arvidsson, but Arvidsson has some similar things in his game. Same thing. Great along the boards, battles, retrieves pucks, finds open space. And once you find the open space, then it allows that skill to develop. But that's the thing to me that stands out the most when I watch the Hoglander clips is that, yeah, the dangles are great, but it's how he's able to get to those spots that I look at and say, oh, he might be able to do this in the NHL too.
Sat, I love that, because the thing that I loved the most about the goal was watching him. He was the one that dumped the puck into the corner, and he went in and retrieved it himself, right? Like that. And like you said, any of the NHL, all those players, they have the dangles. They do those moves. They practice them, on a daily basis. But just looking at that part of the play, I was like, okay, man, like this guy's he might have a little bit extra.
For sure. I mean, it's kind of like, remember calculus or math class in high school? They always said, you got to show your work. Sometimes you can add something up and get the answer, but what was your process to get there, right? Now, when you look at the European ice, sometimes the result will look great, but it's like, what did you do to get there? Nothing. You just kind of skated through, the space was open, you dangled, and you scored a goal. And it's like, well, yeah, that's fantastic, but you're not going to be getting that opportunity in the National Hockey League. So how are you going to build your work to get the result? So it's kind of like the math thing. And when you watch him show his work and you show how he gets from point A to point B, which leads to the goal, that's what's most impressive. And that's what suggests that it could be sustainable. Yeah,
he really wants the puck. Like he wants it on his stick regardless. Like and you'd see it. So I love it. So joined now by Satiar Shah of Sportsnet 650 here on the Unnamed Sports Show. Got a couple more questions here for you. We kind of went off topic, but that's fine because we had an amazing goal to talk about today. What do you think that the Canadian division, what do you think it's going to look like at the end of the season for standings wise?
So the team right now that I would put my money on to win it, and maybe it's because the odds would be decent too, is the Winnipeg Jets. And I don't think the Jets have the best roster in the division, but they have the best goalie in the division. They have a commitment to a style of play, and they're a heavy team that knows how to grind. And looking at the teams in the Canadian division, what sort of weaknesses do a lot of the teams have? Well, look at the Calgary Flames, for instance. Now, they might be better this year. They might be able to grind a bit more. But they're a team that if you lean on them, you can probably find a way to beat them, right? And you saw the Flames give the Jets a scare. Like, I mean, it's not like the Flames can't do that sort of stuff, right, in the playoffs. But I look at how the matchups work out with how the Winnipeg Jets play and how big and heavy they are and how it bodes well for this type of hockey, that I'm looking at them as being the team that's going to pose the most problems. The Toronto Maple Leafs have the most talent, and they might end up winning the division. They're going to be a playoff team for sure. I mean, you're talking about a top two team in the division. I just wonder if matchup-wise, especially with their defense and how leaky they can be, and perhaps that gets fixed, but I'm not sure TJ Brodie's all that different from Tyson Barrie, to be honest with you, right? So if they're a team that could be having trouble against teams that know how to trap it up or know how to play a more reliable style of hockey, right? Know how to lean on you a bit, that poses problems for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We see the Canucks have had problems with that too. And the Edmonton Oilers are a high-powered team. Their power play is going to eat. I mean, they got Tyson Barrie. The power play gets even better, right? So they're a team that's definitely in the mix. But if I had to choose one team right now that I circle, it's probably the Winnipeg Jets. And the main reason for it, they pose a lot of matchup problems for these teams in the Canadian division.
Well, I mean, and you got to think Connor Hellebuck between the pipes there. I mean, that's easily the best goaltender in the division.
Mm-hmm. And that includes, you have Jacob Markstrom, who's great. You have Carey Price, but regular season-wise, Connor Hellebuck's been an absolute wall for the Winnipeg Jets the past few years.
Yeah. What did you make about the NHL's restructuring of the divisions? Did you like it, or do you think they made the right choice?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was never going to be perfect, right? I mean, we live
Yeah.
in a world now with a pandemic that it's about making the best out of a situation. We're not going to be in an idealistic situation. I mean, for us to sit here and even contemplate what it should be looking like in an ideal world is just folly, in my estimation. So I like the breakdown for it. I know some people are a bit questioning, Tampa not having anybody to play against, but it was going to be imperfect regardless of how these divisions fall into place. But I think geographically, you're getting the Western teams, the rivals up against each other, which is what you want. You have the rivals in the East up against each other, which is what you want. So I think the league did a pretty good job of making sure that most of those actual rivalries stay intact. And I think that's the most important thing here when you're trying to realign is that you have some natural rivalries that fans buy into. And for the most part, I think that's been pretty consistent with these new divisions.
Yeah, I'll agree with that as well. So, you mentioned yesterday on the program with yourself and Andrew Walker on Sportsnet 650 that, you thought Brock Boeser might be kind of an underrated player now.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering if you could elaborate more on that.
So Brock Boeser went from his rookie season, and we looked at him and people thought he's going to be this elite level sniper, and he was compared to Matthews, even compared to other guys. And people asked the question, is he going to score 40 goals? He's going to score 50 goals one year. And then his second season didn't quite go as well. Last year had some other injuries as well, right? And you had the holdout stuff. You had the contract stuff that hadn't been figured out. And he did struggle scoring goals for his standard. And we saw what happened in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, Brock Boeser went from being everybody's favorite Canuck as a rookie to all of a sudden being criticized. And some people said he should even be scratched in the playoffs. Some people said trade him for a defenseman, and it was like, just get rid of him because his shot's not the same. He's overrated. He's not the same player anymore. So I think it went from Brock Boeser went from being perhaps overrated after his rookie season to now being underrated after 3 years. And I think people look at him and say, he might never be the same guy you thought he was. But the thing that people have missed about Brock Boeser last year is that last year he was the best hockey player he's been. And it wasn't because he wasn't scoring goals, more reliable defensively, showing more playmaking skills, knowing how to play within a system. He made his teammates better on the ice. He knew how to play within the system, and they found success when he was on the ice. And I know people are tough on Brock, but he's evolving and becoming a better all-around player. And yes, I'd love to see the goal scoring tick up again. And that's what ultimately you're paying him for, is to be a goal scorer. You want to see him get back to being a 30-plus goal guy and have that sort of level to his game. But he might just be a really good two-way all-around player that gets 25 to 30 goals, 60 to 80 points, and that's really good. And just because he doesn't score 40 goals and gets you 90 points doesn't mean he can't give you the same value, but being a better all-around player. So I think we don't appreciate Boeser for how good he truly is and fixate on the fact that he hasn't scored goals at the same pace he did as a rookie.
Yeah, geez, I remember when everyone wanted to trade him to Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think Boeser could be a great two-way player. And like you said, he doesn't necessarily have to score 30 goals to be really effective for the Canucks moving forward, especially with the makeup of their team.
Yeah.
Sat, I know you're a big NFL fan, and you're a Cleveland Browns fan too. Am I right on that?
You are correct about that. Yeah.
You and Brendan Dunlop, I think, are the only two Browns fans that I know of. So
yeah.
How are you enjoying the NFL season this year? And what do you make of your Browns? They look like they're real.
Yeah, I really love the NFL season this year. I mean, it's the one. It hasn't gone without a hitch. You've had a lot of COVID positives. You have games being rescheduled. And you've had a lot of iffy things and stuff like that. So I'm not sitting here and romanticizing the NFL and how they've been able to pull this off. But it's the only normal thing we've had as sports fans and sports media to watch games on Sundays, to follow the NFL. And it's been an intriguing season as far as who the good teams are. We know KC's the best team. And then you have a number of teams with winning records, but they all have flaws. And every week you don't know what to expect. And the rankings will just fluctuate week to week. Like one week you think the Steelers are the best team in the NFL. Now they stub their toes a bit. You're like, maybe the Steelers aren't even the second or third best team. Maybe they're the fifth best team all of a sudden, right? So every single week outside of the Chiefs, there's this big variance about who we think the second or third or fourth best team is. And that creates a lot of intrigue. As far as the Browns go, they're not a perfect team. They have holes still. They have flaws. But they're 9-3. And the Browns haven't won 9 games more than twice in the past 22 years. So I've watched my favorite football team in 22 years since it came back to Cleveland have 2 winning seasons. This is the 3rd winning season in 22 years. So I'm delighted. And the way they're playing defensively with Myles Garrett, and even though they have some holes in the secondary, especially at safety, they have maybe the most dominant defensive player in the league this year alongside Aaron Donald with Myles Garrett. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt have been running roughshod over the league this year. And that O-line has actually been one of the better O-lines in the league. As long as Baker Mayfield doesn't throw them out of games, Josh, they have a chance. And once you get into bad weather games later in the season, teams that are heavy, that they grind, that know how to run the ball and play in your face, they can have a bit more success. So I don't think the Browns are a top 5 team. I don't have the Browns as a favorite to do anything in the playoffs, but I have genuine hope that they could surprise. They could beat somebody because they're built to be a team that come playoff time is going to be hard to beat.
One of the things that I really liked about the Browns offseason is they really solidified the trenches. Like you said, their offensive line has been good this year, and the defensive line has been good this year, and that's a winning recipe in the NFL to win football games.
Absolutely. I mean, they draft Jedrick Wills, a left tackle, who's been, for a rookie, has been fantastic, getting better and better every week. Jack Conklin, he got a big contract, and overall, he's probably slightly above league average, or slightly above average for a right tackle. But there aren't that many good right tackles in the NFL. So here's the thing: like in the NFL, you look at how many tackles there actually are that are actually good, especially on the right side too. Sometimes you can't even find a guy who's decent or good or great. You try to find a guy that just doesn't get killed every single snap, right? And there are a lot of those guys that happen. So Jack Conklin isn't great, but he's a huge upgrade on what they had. And then Wyatt Teller at guard, who's on the COVID list now, so he may not play on Monday against the Ravens, but he's been one of the better guards in the league this year. So you're right. You add 2 tackles, Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin, and then Wyatt Teller takes a big step as a guard, and the trenches improve immensely all of a sudden.
So the Browns are actually my second favorite team. I don't know if anybody even knows that, but just a soft spot for them for years and years. My old football coach in high school was a Browns fan. So, but my main team is the LA Rams. They got a big game against the Patriots coming up this afternoon.
Oh, I like the Rams' chances in the NFC too. I mean, they're a team. If you want to talk about a team that knows how to grind, a team that's heavy and plays playoff football, and is a monster to face right now with their defense and just how they run the ball so effectively and Sean McVay's play calling. They're the team in the NFC I would fear the most.
Yeah, I am pretty happy with how they're looking. Like you said, they're defensively. I mean, they're really coming up. I think it kind of comes to what you said about the Browns and Baker Mayfield. As long as Jared Goff isn't throwing away a game, which you've basically seen in their losses, the Rams have a pretty good shot in the NFC.
No, absolutely. They have a chance. And we'll see how they play against the Patriots, because the Patriots all of a sudden, they figure some stuff out. I mean, Bill Belichick, we talk in the NFL about how many wins is a good coach worth. I think we're going to find out this year with Bill Belichick, because that team is not very good. They've had COVID issues with their quarterback. A bunch of their most key players on defense opted out of the season to even play. Stephon Gilmore hasn't been the same. He's been injured as well and been off the roster a few times. And the fact that this team might finish 500, they're 6-6 now, that only tells you about how good of a coach Bill Belichick is.
I think I heard you guys talking yesterday. I mean, they should be at least 7-5, right? I mean, the game against Seattle, Russ, he was stopped right on the goal line. I don't know what that play call was, but yeah, I definitely thought they were going to beat the Seahawks on that one. And there's a couple other ones. The one against the Bills too, where they
and that's the game that didn't even have Cam Newton, right? And Cam Newton missed time with COVID. And so if you kind of give them, a third of a game here, a third of a game there, and then a third of a game against the Seahawks they should have had, I think it's at the very least they're a team that should be 7-5 instead of 6-6. And if they're 7-5 instead of 6-6 this time in the season, we're talking about a team that is probably going to make the playoffs and be a team you don't want to face in the playoffs. They won't win the Super Bowl, but because of Bill Belichick, a team you don't want to be facing in the wild card round.
Which is why, as good as the Rams are playing, I'm a little bit nervous about the game this afternoon. Somebody's asking me like, "Oh, do you think the Rams are just going to blow them out?" I was like, "No, it's going to be a defensive, very well schemed game, and I'm going to be nervous the whole time." So
yeah, it'll be a grind.
So Sat, I see we're like well past 30 minutes here. So thank you very much for joining me today on the Unnamed Sports Show. People can find Sat on the program with Andrew Walker on Sportsnet 650 from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. Sat, anything else you want to finish off with, or?
No, that's great, man. I appreciate you having me on, Josh. I know you've been doing your thing too. I'm glad to see you're doing the broadcasting, you got your show and everything. So I'm super excited for you. And anytime you need in the future, just hit me up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.
Thanks, man.
The Unnamed Sports Show here on the Sports Talkline Network. Really hope that everyone enjoyed that interview and are ready for the 2021 NHL season. It was such a pleasure to chat with Satiar Shah today from Sportsnet 650. I, for one, feel a little bit better about what the season has in store now. So before we wrap things up, I want to give my thoughts kind of on the Vancouver Canucks. As we move into training camp, I really like the core addition of Nate Schmidt, as we talked about. I think ultimately it's going to push the Canucks across the playoff line with the progression of Pettersson and Hughes. So that should be good to see for this season. Let me know what you think about the Canucks down in the comments or on Twitter at JoshuaGriffith0. So on behalf of the Sports Talkline Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 364, I want to thank you for joining me today on the Unnamed Sports Show. And I want to thank my guest, Satiar Shah, for making some time and joining me to chat NHL and Canucks. Make sure that you tune to all of our other great shows, like and subscribe down at the bottom. And I want to make sure that everyone out there stays safe and healthy. So I have been your host, Joshua Griffith, and remember, as always, to love sports, all sports.